Welcome to the Women and Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. Esther is a respected leader in the field of personal financial advice with over 25 years of experience. After going through her own significant and challenging life-changing events, she overcame fear and self-doubt to launch her own successful advisory firm. Now Esther is ready to share her practical and personal experiences to help other women clear their hurdles and brave life's transitions. In this way, she inspires women to lead fulfilling and confident lives.
Hello and welcome to Women and Wealth with Esther Szabo from Gates Pass Advisors. Good morning, Esther. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're healthy, well, strong here. Looking forward to another day, actually. How are you doing, Eric?
I am looking forward to another day as well. It's always good when you can look forward to another day, another week. I think it's warming up. I mean, it's been really hot lately, so we've hit the river already, which is good. A good way to social distance because you float, quite a ways away from everybody else. So that's kind of fun. We're still doing a little social distancing, but with fun involved, which is a change.
Absolutely. Yes. Very fun. I think you guys are opening up a bit more than we are. And plus, we have no river here. So I don't have that experience.
Well, I think that most people, if they came here, they wouldn't want to float in the river we do, but that's all we have. So we're just going to go ahead and call it good, right? Nobody floats in Missouri. Lessons. Yeah. We don't float that one because there's usually cows floating in there and other things you just don't want to mess with. But the couple of the other smaller ones, we can get in, and they're fun. Yeah.
It does sound fun. Well, that's the one of the secrets of this time. It's like, what are the benefits of going through this really challenging time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know today that you and I usually have quite a bit of interaction on our podcast, but today this is really you speaking directly to the audience about really important things and just kind of some of the things that you've noticed, some of the things we've talked about on past podcasts, and also kind of some things we're going to be looking for in the future. Is that right?
That's just about right, Eric. What we're talking about this morning is when we're almost, not quite, but can you believe how fast the year is going? We're almost halfway through this year.
Yeah.
And when we do send out, we're not market prognosticators. We don't have crystal balls. We don't believe in following short-term recommendations, but we do send out our mid-year and beginning of the year forecasts. In the beginning of 2020, a couple things that we said is that in 2020, the economy and or the market will do something that surprises us. And I would say that's come true so far. The market has done two things, actually. In February, the S&P hit a high. It was February 19th, actually. And the S&P was at 3386. And then between February 19 and March 23rd, a little less than 5 weeks, it dropped almost 35%.
Yeah.
Huge, scary decline. But then it's by the end of May, when I'm recording this, it's just the first part of June. By the end of May, it had rallied back over 30%. To end May at 30.44. So both of those things, huge surprise. When we walked into 2020, what we were talking about then is we had such a good year last year, 2019. What does that mean as one moves into 2020? How does one evaluate and consider that? And what was being talked about at that time is what are the catalysts for future appreciation in the market? And we weren't looking at fast deceleration. We were just saying, it's probably going to be slow and steady because there aren't more tax cuts. We don't see a big catalyst to growth, but the alternatives to equity investing, i.e. bonds and cash, not super exciting. So we were anticipating appreciation, but slowly. But we also said we do expect markets to surprise us. They always will in the short term. I'm going to come back to the economy as part of what we said about the economy at the beginning of the year, that it will do something that surprises us. But we had about 8. One of the others was you will be tempted to abandon your plan at some point based either on expert forecasts and or short-term market performance. And who wouldn't have been tempted to change their plan with the market dropping almost 35% in less than 5 weeks with a pandemic going on, with this shelter in place, with businesses shuttering? Who wouldn't? And recently I had a conversation with a colleague who said, you know what? If we had said at the end of May 2019, client, over the next 12 months, we're going to experience a pandemic. We're going to experience huge oil shocks. We're going to have basically the economy shut down. We'll all have to stay inside our homes. Business travel will virtually stop. Certainly leisure travel will stop. Who would have said, yes, let's invest in the stock market? The thought would have been, yeah, let's hold off on cash, let's sell, let's wait until the news looks a little better. But in reality, over the last 12 months, the S&P is up about 10%. And so it just is, it will surprise us over and over again. We're not market timers. And during this time, we answered a lot of questions, and I'm sure we'll continue. That's part of our job. We answer questions. We're available to our clients. And the questions were, well, why didn't we sell at the market high or close to it and move to cash, since we had been saying we didn't anticipate big returns as we had in 2019? Why not capture more of those returns? And what we've been talking about is, first of all, just listening and understanding. Can completely understand where that question is coming from. And why don't we? What we go back to is one's plan dictates what the investment allocation should be. It's not like we just set an allocation and go to sleep, but we look at the plan dictates what is the cash needs of each client, what are the cash needs of each client and the short-term needs, and how do we build the more stable, i.e. the bond portion around that. Because the equity, because markets and the economy will do things that surprise us on a short-term basis, we don't go into either of those unless we know we can pretty much leave those untouched for the next at least 10 years. For clients, it's hard to hear 10 years, so we might say 5 years, because it's hard to get your head around 10 years, but we'd look at really 10 to 20 years. We're leaving that untouched. That's the retirement money. We might take off pieces over time because we do look at asset allocation. How much in cash, bonds, stocks, to keep it very simple. I mean, stocks then gets divvied out into foreign stocks. Foreign stocks gets divvied into emerging market and developed. Both get split into how much in value, how much in growth, how much in large, medium, and small. So there's a lot of allocation that goes on. And as there's appreciation in the market, there is natural rebalancing that goes on. So it's a very natural part of asset allocation to sell high and move to lower returning securities. So that is part of what goes on all throughout a portfolio life. It's not something that we do based on, the S&P has hit a high, it's February 19th, it's hit a high, let's sell now and wait. No, that's a completely different approach than what we take. We look at that and say, okay, would we want to make some adjustments? Do we want to reduce and reallocate? Does the client anticipate needing more cash in the upcoming? We look at it strategically, but we don't look at it in terms of, that's a market high, let's go to cash and do a wholesale sale. We often say, because of this, that the market volatility is not our client's volatility. With all the news, and I don't know about you, Eric, myself included, as well as many others that I talk to, have had to go on a news diet.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that too. Like, pay attention to those on whatever media outlets that you feel give you the best information that you need. Which we do, and then basically it's recycled over and over and over and over and over again. And it can take away from all the good that is in each day, even though it is a challenging time. For example, I'll deviate a little bit here. My mom, who's 96, is living with us right now. When the shelter in place started, she actually had been living in an independent apartment. It wasn't continuing care, just independent. Mm-hmm. And my sister and I, who live locally, relatively locally, were just concerned because she has macular degeneration. People would be coming in, visiting with her, caregivers, perhaps some others. And we're like, yeah, we just can't control her access very well to others. And obviously we can't control what they're doing. So she stayed up at my sister's for 2.5 months. And then she came and she's been with me since the beginning of this month, June. And if I just sat and focused on the news and the anxiety and the uncertainty, of which there's plenty, that would take away from, I don't know how many more Junes I'll have with my 96-year-old mom. So I listen for what I need to stay current, to be a good advisor on behalf of my clients. There's certainly economists that I appreciate, others that I appreciate listening to. And then I go to what is here in my day. So this is going back to asset allocation. Why we say what's on the news doesn't necessarily fit with your plan and your asset allocation. The other is that because the plan dictates, first of all, what the asset allocation is, and backing into that, what is a client's near-term cash needs, many cash needs, clients are very, very happily reporting, I'm not spending nearly as much money as we expected. And of course, that translates, if we just keep, looking at the domino effect of that, that's part of the challenge with the economy right now. But many cash needs are lower in 2020 due to the coronavirus limitations on going out, restaurants, retail, travel, etc. So we're not market timers. We don't try and say when to come out of the market wholesale at all, or even when to go in, because we don't know when the rallies will occur. We just do know that they will be surprising. So what our job has been during this time is to stay connected with our clients, to continue to assess portfolios in light of what's going on in their lives. And I will say, clients are amazingly resilient. They do understand this. Our clients, everyone thinks that, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm doing okay, Esther, but the rest of your clients, they must be really, calling on you. And actually, clients have been amazingly resilient. We have very good, thoughtful discussions about this, and they appreciate the engagement that we have with them, that we don't dive under desks when the market drops 35%, and we don't crow about how fabulous we are when it goes up 30. That's just the ups and downs of the market. It's a very emotional barometer. The other prediction, going along with the first one, was that the economy will do something that surprises us. So one of the things, when we came into 2020, we had been looking at historically low unemployment rates as they dropped since the Great Recession, 2008-9. They've just been dropping for a number of years. So they've been very, very low. And then here we are, less than 6 months, full months into the year, we're looking at huge unemployment with almost 30 million Americans receiving unemployment benefits.
Yeah.
And that is really challenging. These are oftentimes people who, looking at the stock market means nothing to them. They need work to be able to cover basic housing, food, vehicle, utility costs. And it's a really challenging time. And I imagine I will sound quite archaic here, but I'm still someone who likes a print newspaper. I still subscribe to a few. And I don't know how it is where you are in Nebraska, but on our paper, there's certainly been those pictures of that harken back to breadline pictures of the Great Depression. It's more food pantry pictures, people lined up to get baskets of food.
Yeah.
Stories about people who say, I've never had to do this before, and it's really hard, but they're getting food assistance. Do you look at the paper? Are you a paper person or are you done with that now? Are you all digital, Eric?
I am pretty much all digital. Yeah, I love to hold a book and read it. I like to get a newspaper every once in a while, but I don't subscribe.
I know I am a dying breed. It's true. But I still do. I'm a very alive dying breed. But this raises the question, and I just like to hit it head on. Are we looking at a depression right now rather than a recession? And that's a surprise. We certainly weren't talking about that word when we came into 2020. And while this is a really serious time, we are looking at differences now versus the Great Depression. At the time of the Great Depression, social safety nets were really limited to provide relief to the unemployed. Now we do have unemployment insurance. And then on top of that, recent fiscal policy was put in place to raise that minimum benefit. And again, it's going to expire at the end of June or the middle of July to have that extra bump that was put in place for 3 months through the CARES Act to give everybody enough unemployment insurance per week to cover the minimum household income. And that's going to be expiring. There's more stories about whether or not that will be extended. But that was something that wasn't in place in the Depression. Monetary policy, that's what the Fed does. The Fed sets monetary policy. And at the time of the Great Depression, there was not an encouragement of lending at that time. Now it's very much a policy that's very loan friendly. That is, interest rates are very, very low. And that's why recently our last podcast recently posted was about your mortgage. What do you want to do about your mortgage in this time? It is a very good financial tool. Given that monetary policy is so friendly towards lending, consider examining that tool for how it might benefit you right now. The other thing that we know is there was no FDI insurance. So in the Great Depression, many, many banks failed. There were runs on banks for people to get their cash. Banks couldn't meet them. Banks closed, went bankrupt. Now we have FDI insurance, and that insurance has been raised to be $250,000 for every one who is registered with an account. So if somebody, for example, owns a bank account in the name of their trust, every trustee and every beneficiary gets that $250,000. So there's a lot more protection. And then that CARES Act that came through did provide, again, also the payroll protection program, support for small businesses. And the question going on now, as I mentioned a moment ago, is does this need to be reassessed, expanded, et cetera? Because we don't know when we'll have full recovery. The stock market is not it's a predictor of looking forward, but we're going to, just because the stock market has recovered to date, and we do anticipate that there will be further shocks. There's a couple things going on in the stock market. The S&P 500 is very much dominated by tech companies. Tech companies have done very well through this because we're all relying on technology very heavily to continue business. And pretty similar to how we were doing it before for those of us who do work in fields where we do rely primarily on technology. The oil price shocks from earlier this year, the oil price wars have resolved. We're further through this pandemic, but we're waiting to see really whether we do have a second wave and of the virus. So a gradual economic recovery is expected. We're not anticipating a full economic recovery until early 2022 is best guess at this point. And that doesn't mean stay out of stocks until then, because again, the market looks beyond the current, what's going on, to the future. But there's a number of things in place now that were not in place during the Great Depression that we think will stave off anything like what occurred then. Doesn't mean it's all roses and rainbows right now at all. It means being very present to what's going on, but that we're not going to see the length of recovery needed that was needed at that time before we come back to full economic recovery. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit now from predictions and what's happening, to also come back to our approach as financial transitionists. What that means is we look at both the technical, as what I've been talking about the first few moments, and the personal sides of money. Now, some poo-poo that and go, oh, there's no, personal, it's all technical. But if any of us look, even at this year, were we completely stoic about the markets? Did we make any changes? Did we pull back anywhere in reaction to what's going on? How much toilet paper was purchased? How many canned goods? There's a lot of things that, again, our philosophy is there are short-term decisions that are made in reaction to what's going on that sometimes are exactly right on and sometimes are just a flight to safety that can damage our long-term security. Having a lot of toilet paper, not so much, but perhaps selling and going to cash, missing out on the recovery that we've had so far could be. It's often talked about in the news now. How many times have you heard the phrase new normal? In our new normal, it's talked about every single day. And new normal is a phase of a transition. There are 4, if you recall. I've talked about them in other podcasts. I'll talk about them again. But new normal is actually the final stage of a transition. And in that stage, you were there because the pandemic would almost be completely forgotten. Life, while it would feel different, would feel very normal and routine. Does your life feel normal and routine, Eric?
No, not yet. Now I have a routine. However, it's not normal. So
what's different about it?
Oh, well, my wife being home still at this point, and my daughter is still working. She works at a credit union, and so she's there every day. But it's, again, not being able to see my parents as much as I would like.
Yes.
My father and I are fishing together, which has been fantastic because you can easily social distance on the lake. We just kind of leapfrog each other around the lake and have a good time that way. But it's not like we can go over for dinner and just sit down, hold hands, and break bread. So that's tough.
Yes.
But but there is definitely a routine in place, and I think we were talking about it earlier that going inner tubing with friends, and that's all good to be able to get together again, but it's not quite as often or as intimate as it used to be.
Yeah. It is really hard. It's like, and I appreciate the word that you said, routine. It's reestablishing routines. And until those just feel like your normal way of life, it's still not the new normal. And you might consider what it was like. You remember traveling before 9/11 and how we used to be able to go to the gates all the way down when people were walking right off the plane and be right there to welcome them, and where we didn't have to take off our shoes and belts and run our laptops through all of that stuff. Compare it to life now after, where we're just used to that. Mm-hmm. And if you're like me, you're willing to pay some serious money to avoid doing those things each year.
Pre-check, absolutely.
Yes. Love that. But for many who just, travel a little bit, it's like, okay, you got to do all this stuff, shoes, etc., each time you go through it. But now we're like, okay, this is what we have to do. We have to show up quite a bit earlier to go through security when we do travel again. Mm-hmm. So we're not there yet with this pandemic. In fact, we're 2 stages behind it, still at this phase that we call ending. And in ending, what we're doing is what we're doing right now. We're waiting for broader testing. It is broadening, but we're still waiting for broader testing, treatments, and vaccines, and having more confidence that we can avoid infection. Things are opening up, and we're happy about that. I was so glad in my town here of Los Altos. I was out on Friday running a few errands, and the restaurants are open, and there's patio seating, and it's really good to see the shopkeepers here. I've worked in this town for over 20 years now, and I really appreciate seeing I support this town a lot with my dollars, and it's great to see those shopkeepers and restaurants opening up and being able to serve patrons. But we're all wondering, how will that work? Will the businesses survive well enough to be 6 feet apart? Will there be a second wave? All of that. So we're wanting to have more confidence that we can avoid infection as we move forward. And this, again, is likely to last into 2021, into next year. So the question arises, well, shoot, because we all kind of want to be through this. We're all eager to get back to normal. We're not there yet. And in my conversations with people are like, oh, gosh, we so want to get to normal, but am I comfortable going out there yet? Am I comfortable being in a crowd? Not yet. So what do we do? I refer you to episode 42 of the podcast where I address this, how to manage right now. It's 3 tips for navigating challenging times, because there are absolutely things to do. We don't just sit on our hands and pretend it's all not happening. There are things to do. And you mentioned one of them, which is, what is our routine? Who can we connect with during this time? But listen to that for more information. And just so you know, I said this, we're not at new normal. We're 2 stages behind. We're in this ending. The next stage after that is passage. And that's when we're getting back to regular routines, moving into that next phase of new normal. But that, the new routines, what will that be like with coronavirus? What will that be like based on the vaccine? What will that mean? There's a whole lot of questions that are still unknown, which is why this is still such a time of uncertainty. So we'll be talking about that in a future podcast. But to sum up, just know we're not market forecasters, but our forecast of the economy and markets, that they'll do something that surprises us in 2020 has been true so far, as has the prediction that we will be tempted to abandon our plan. 2020 isn't over yet, so we're still holding to those predictions. So know that if you are tempted to abandon your plan, that's normal. We can all be subject to those things, which is why at Gates Pass Advisors, we have a network of professional input for us as advisors, as well as in service to our clients. And if you'd like to connect in, go to our website, gatespassadvisors.com. You can hit the contact button. Let us know if you'd like to be on our newsletter list, which comes out with current content, including mind game videos. These are short videos that come out once a month. There's also a tab on the website for mind games videos about what's going on currently. All this uncertainty and anxiety can stir up things, and how we can address those with different perceptions. The current one that's up there is shock, awe, and perspective. Also, if you'd like to arrange a consultation, you can do that too. Just hit that contact button. Eric, it's been really good to talk with you again, and I wish you happy tubing.
Thank you. And I appreciate the fact that this was a very intimate podcast. You gave the audience and myself, of course, so much great information. I'm hoping that people are taking this very seriously and the things that you're saying to heart. Please reach out to Esther and her team. Check out the website. It is fantastic. And I'll tell you, if you think that her voice is soothing when you're hearing her on the podcast, you should talk to her in person, or at least
I'll put you right to sleep.
There you go. You'll sleep better at night if you subscribe to the podcast. I'm kidding. No, but seriously, she has a way with her clients, and I think that any of her clients would tell you the same thing. Definitely has a way to be able to talk to us and maybe alleviate some of those concerns and fears and that us wanting to pull the trigger on, okay, I've got to get out of this investment. I've got to do this. Yeah. I'm going to make some major changes in my life. And you know what? Maybe we just need to slow down just for a moment and take a look and say, okay, maybe it's not as bad as we thought, or maybe there's some better options that we haven't considered yet. And so we need to have that conversation. Esther, thank you so much for your time today.
Eric, thanks. And I it's something that occurs to me right at the last moment as we're closing here, just besides coronavirus, besides this challenging economic environment, people's lives are continuing. I've spoken with people recently who've lost a spouse recently, whose job has been terminated because of this. I mean, difficult things are happening on top of that. And we are here to do exactly that, to listen, to be present, and to assess what needs to be done right now and what can be put off later. Our brains get activated and we think we've got to do all this stuff now, and it's overwhelming. Yeah. Everything doesn't have to happen now. We can take it step by step, bit by bit, as we all step through this. So thanks for allowing me a little extra PS on here.
Yeah, no. And my extra PS is just like you said, step by step, and there's nobody better to step with you and walk right beside you than Esther and her team. So make that call or go to the website, check them out, and start that conversation. Again, Esther, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Eric. Talk to you soon.
You bet. And for all you listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Women in Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Esther comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Gates Pass Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Women and Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you receive notifications of new podcasts as they become available. Check out the website at www.gatespassadvisors.com for more information. This content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.